He stood frozen in the doorway of his son's bedroom, his heart pounding as he stared at the impossible scene before him. His twin boys, Miles and Noah, who had terrorized every caregiver for 6 months, were fast asleep. But what shocked him most wasn't the silence. It was the woman lying between them, holding them like they were her own. "Sir, don't," his security chief had whispered when Caleb reached for the doorknob. "Let me handle this. She's violated protocol." But Caleb couldn't move. For 6 months, this bedroom had been a war zone, screaming, thrashing, terror that erupted every night at 8 p.m., like clockwork. 23 nannies had quit, some within hours. Others never came back after the first night, their resignation emails arriving before sunrise. Yet here was Naomi Brooks, a quiet black woman with no elite credentials and a worn suitcase, doing what no Ivy League child psychologist, no Swiss-trained governess, no five-star nanny had managed to do. She was still here. Miles's small hand clutched her sleeve. Noah's head rested against her shoulder. Both boys breathed peacefully, their faces relaxed in sleep instead of twisted in nightmares. "How long has she been like this?" Caleb whispered. "All night, sir. She never left them." Caleb felt something crack inside his chest, something he'd kept locked away since Elena died. He stepped closer, and that's when he heard it, the soft rhythm of her voice, barely audible, speaking words he hadn't heard in this house for half a year. She was praying. "I know you're scared," Naomi had whispered to the boys hours earlier when they'd hurled toys at her and screamed that they hated her. "And I know you think if you're mean enough to me, I'll leave just like all the others." Miles had glared at her with his mother's eyes. "You will leave. Everyone does." Naomi had knelt down, meeting his gaze with quiet strength. "I'm not going anywhere. And by morning, I'm going to show you something that will change everything." "What?" Noah had challenged, his small voice breaking. "I'm going to show you that some people stay." That's when the real meltdown had begun. The twins had destroyed their room, thrown books, torn curtains. But Naomi hadn't called security, hadn't demanded discipline. She'd simply lain down on their bed, opened her arms, and waited. And when they finally collapsed in exhaustion and fear, she'd gathered them close and sung a lullaby that made Caleb's blood run cold when he heard it on the security feed. It was Elena's song, the one his late wife used to sing to the boys before bed, the one Caleb had forbidden anyone to mention. But what happened next would shake the entire household and force Caleb to confront a truth he'd been running from since the day his wife died. 6 months earlier, Caleb Harrington sat in his corner office 70 floors above Manhattan, staring at his phone as it rang for the 4th time that morning. He knew what it was. Another resignation. Another nanny who couldn't handle his demon children. He was right. "Mr. Harrington?" His assistant's voice was tight with stress. "I have bad news, and catastrophic news." Caleb loosened his tie, feeling the walls of his billion-dollar empire closing in. "Start with the bad." The twins locked Mrs. Chen in the pantry for 3 hours. By the time security found her, she was having a panic attack. She's threatening to sue. And the catastrophic news? That was the catastrophic news, sir. Mrs. Chen was nanny number 23. Caleb closed his eyes. 6 months ago, he'd had everything. A beautiful wife, 2 bright, joyful sons, a real estate empire that stretched across 3 continents. Then Elena's car had skidded on black ice, and his entire world had shattered like glass. The boys had changed overnight. Miles and Noah went from happy kindergartners to children possessed by grief and rage. They refused to sleep, refused to eat, destroyed everything they touched, and they drove away every single person Caleb hired to help them. Therapists called them severely traumatized. Teachers called them unmanageable. The staff called them cursed. Caleb called them his greatest failure. Sir, his assistant continued carefully, the agency says they won't send anyone else. Word has spread. No one wants to work for the Harrington family. Caleb stared out at the city that used to make him feel powerful. Now it just felt empty. Post an ad online. Offer triple the standard rate. Someone desperate enough will apply. But Caleb had no idea that the woman who would answer his ad wasn't desperate for money. She was answering a different kind of call. 30-year-old Naomi Brooks sat in her small Brooklyn apartment, rain drumming against the window as she scrolled through job listings. She'd been unemployed for 3 months, and her savings were nearly gone. But something kept stopping her from taking the easy positions. She was waiting for something, someone. When she saw the Harrington listing, she almost scrolled past it. Seeking experienced caregiver for twin boys, age 6. Previous candidates found position challenging. Exceptional compensation for exceptional patients. Challenging. That was rich people code for nightmare. Naomi did what she always did. She prayed first, researched second. That's when she found the news articles about Elena Harrington's death and saw the photos of 2 heartbroken little boys at their mother's funeral. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew those faces. Not literally, but spiritually. She'd worn that same expression at 7 years old when her own world had collapsed, when loss had turned her into someone she didn't recognize, when fear had made her push away everyone who tried to help. Lord, Naomi whispered, tears filling her eyes, those babies aren't broken. They're drowning. She spent the rest of the night writing an application unlike any resume she'd ever sent. She didn't list her credentials. She listed her scars. She didn't promise control. She promised understanding, and she prayed that whoever read it would recognize the difference. Caleb sat in his home study 3 days later, exhausted from another sleepless night of the twins screaming. His assistant had scheduled interviews with 5 candidates, but Caleb wasn't hopeful. Most people quit after reading the full job description. The first candidate arrived in a sharp suit with a leather portfolio. Mr. Harrington, I specialize in behavioral modification for difficult children, firm boundaries, and consistent consequences. I've never met a child I couldn't bring to heal. Caleb showed her out within 5 minutes. His sons weren't horses to be broken. The second candidate was younger, enthusiastic, armed with Pinterest boards and craft supplies. I just know once the boys see how fun I am, they'll forget about being sad. Caleb thanked her politely and felt his hope dying. Then Naomi Brooks arrived. She stood in his doorway wearing a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, her eyes holding something Caleb couldn't quite name. Not pity, not fear, something older, deeper, wisdom earned through suffering. Mr. Harrington, I'm Naomi Brooks. Thank you for seeing me. As Caleb led her to his study, he noticed she didn't gawk at the marble floors or the original artwork. Her gaze moved to the family photos on the walls, lingering on the ones of the boys with their mother. Tell me about yourself, Miss Brooks. Naomi met his eyes directly. Mr. Harrington, I don't have a degree from Yale. I don't have references from celebrity families. What I have is 8 years of caring for children, a childhood that taught me what grief looks like in little hearts, and a faith that won't let me walk away from children in pain. Caleb leaned forward. What do you mean? I grew up in foster care after my parents died. I know what it's like to be 6 years old and terrified that everyone you love will disappear. I know what it's like to act out because anger feels safer than sadness. Naomi's voice was gentle but steady. I read about your family's loss, Mr. Harrington. Your sons aren't bad children. They're grieving children. And grief in a child often looks like warfare. Something unlocked in Caleb's chest. The previous nannies all said my sons were impossible. That's because they were trying to control them instead of comfort them, Your boys aren't trying to be difficult, Mr. Harrington. They're trying to survive. For the first time in 6 months, Caleb felt like someone was speaking his secret language. Miss Brooks, I should warn you. My sons have driven away 23 caregivers. They can be violent, destructive. Naomi smiled softly. Mr. Harrington, I've cared for children who set fires because they wanted the world to burn like their hearts were burning. Destruction is just grief with nowhere else to go. Caleb stared at this woman who saw his sons as souls instead of problems. When can you start? Tomorrow morning. But, Mr. Harrington? Naomi's expression grew serious. I need you to understand something. I'm not here to fix your children. I'm here to love them while God does the healing. If you're looking for quick results, I'm not your answer. Caleb felt tears prick his eyes for the first time since the funeral. Miss Brooks, I'm not looking for quick results. I'm looking for a miracle. Good, Naomi said quietly, because that's exactly what I believe God sent me here to be part of. The next morning, Naomi arrived at the Harrington estate at dawn, carrying a worn Bible and a bag containing homemade banana bread. She knew first impressions mattered, especially with children who'd been abandoned by every adult they'd trusted. The head of household, Mrs. Pierce, met her at the servants' entrance with barely concealed skepticism. The boys are still asleep. Mr. Harrington wants you to wait in the kitchen until... A crash echoed from upstairs, followed by screaming. Mrs. Pierce's face went pale. It's starting early today. But Naomi was already moving toward the stairs, her heart pounding with purpose instead of fear. She'd spent the entire night praying, and she knew what she was walking into wasn't just a job. It was a battlefield between fear and faith. And by the end of this day, everyone in this mansion would witness what happens when someone finally refuses to run. Before we go any further, take a second to support this story. Subscribe now to this channel, like this video, and share it with someone who loves emotional stories like this. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We'd love to see how far this story has traveled. Naomi took the stairs 2 at a time, her sensible shoes barely making a sound on the marble steps. The screaming grew louder as she approached the boys' wing, raw primal sounds that made Mrs. Pierce cover her ears and retreat to the kitchen. But Naomi had heard these sounds before, in her own throat, in the darkness of foster homes where no one came when you called. She found the twins' bedroom door locked from the inside. Through the wood, she could hear crashes, breaking glass, and beneath it all, a sound that broke her heart, sobbing. Miles? Noah? Naomi kept her voice gentle, pressing her palm against the door. My name is Naomi. I'm not here to hurt you. Go away, Miles screamed. We don't want you here. Everyone leaves. Noah's voice cracked with tears. You'll leave too. Naomi closed her eyes, and suddenly she was 7 years old again, locked in a bathroom of her 3rd foster home, convinced that if she just stayed small enough, quiet enough, maybe someone would finally keep her. I know you're scared, Naomi said softly. I know you think I'll leave like all the others, but I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. The crashing stopped. In the silence, she could hear them breathing. When I was about your age, I lost my parents too. And I was so angry at God, at the world, at everyone who kept trying to help me. You know why? Silence. Because I thought if I pushed them away first, it wouldn't hurt as much when they left. But here's what I learned. Naomi's voice grew stronger. Some people are sent to stay. And I believe with my whole heart that God sent me to you. She heard a small sound, maybe a sob, maybe a gasp. Now, I'm going to wait right here until you're ready to open this door. And if you're not ready today, I'll come back tomorrow, and the day after that, because that's what staying means. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then she heard the click of the lock. The door opened slowly, and Naomi's heart shattered at what she saw. The room looked like a hurricane had torn through it. Books scattered everywhere, lamps overturned, curtains half ripped from their rods, and in the center of it all, two small boys with tear-stained faces and eyes full of terror that no 6-year-old should carry. Miles stood in front of his brother protectively, a toy truck gripped in his hand like a weapon. "You're just going to tell Daddy we're bad. Everyone does." Naomi stepped carefully into the room, glass crunching under her feet. "Miles, Noah, may I sit down?" They didn't answer, but they didn't throw anything either. Naomi sank onto the edge of the destroyed bed, meeting them at eye level. "Can I tell you what I see when I look at you?" She waited until both boys reluctantly met her gaze. "I don't see bad children. I see two brave boys who are carrying something way too heavy for their hearts." Noah's lower lip trembled. "Mama died." "I know, baby. I know she did." "It was nighttime," Miles whispered, his voice hollow. "Daddy said she went to sleep and didn't wake up. So if we go to sleep—" Naomi's breath caught as understanding flooded through her. "Oh, sweetheart, you think if you fall asleep you won't wake up either?" Miles nodded, tears streaming down his face. "And Noah thinks—" He looked at his brother. Noah's voice was barely audible. "I think God takes people we love. So if we love someone new, He'll take them too." Naomi felt tears burning her own eyes. This wasn't rebellion. This was spiritual terror wrapped in 6-year-old logic. These boys weren't fighting sleep. They were fighting death itself. "Come here," Naomi said softly, opening her arms. The boys didn't move. "Please, let me hold you, just for a minute." Miles's face crumpled. "But what if you leave? Then you'll know I'm a liar. But I'm not going to leave, Miles. I promise you I'm not." That broke them. Both boys ran to her, crashing into her with the force of 6 months of unshed grief. Naomi wrapped them tight, one on each side, and let them sob into her shoulders. "I'm scared," Noah whimpered. "I miss Mama," Miles cried. I know you do." Naomi rocked them gently. "And it's okay to be scared. It's okay to miss her. But listen to me." She pulled back just enough to see their faces. "Sleep is not death. Sleep is God's gift so our bodies can rest. And your mama didn't go to sleep and not wake up. God called her home to heaven, and that's different. But what if He calls you too?" Miles's eyes were desperate. Naomi cupped his face in her hand. "Then God and I are going to have a serious conversation, because He sent me here for you, and I take my assignments very seriously." Despite everything, Noah let out a small, hiccuping laugh. "Now," Naomi said, "I'm going to tell you what we're going to do tonight. We're going to clean up this room together. Then we're going to have some banana bread I made. And then," she paused for emphasis, "I'm going to stay with you until you fall asleep, and I'll be right here when you wake up." "You'll stay all night?" Miles's voice was full of fragile hope. "All night, every night, until you don't need me to anymore." As they cleaned the room together, Naomi learned their language. Miles needed facts and logic. Noah needed physical closeness. Both needed someone who wouldn't flinch at their pain. By 8 o'clock, the room was restored to order. The boys sat on their bed in matching pajamas, looking smaller and more vulnerable than they had all day. "I don't know if I can sleep," Miles admitted. "That's okay. We'll just lie here together." Naomi kicked off her shoes and lay down between them, one boy tucked under each arm. "Close your eyes. You don't have to sleep. Just rest." Noah clutched her sleeve. "Will you pray?" Naomi's heart expanded. "Yes, baby, I'll pray." She spoke into the darkness, her voice steady and sure. "Father God, thank you for Miles and Noah. Thank you for their brave hearts and their mama who loved them so much. Tonight, I'm asking you to wrap these boys in your peace. Remind them that you are good, that you are near, and that sleep is safe because you never sleep. You're always watching over them. Then Without thinking, Naomi began to hum. The melody came from somewhere deep in her memory, a gospel lullaby her own mother had sung before the fire took everything. Miles went rigid. "That's Mama's song." Naomi's eyes flew open. "What?" "Mama used to sing that," Noah whispered. "How? Do you know it?" Naomi felt the Holy Spirit move through the room like a current. "I don't know, baby, but maybe your mama and my mama learned it from the same God." She kept humming, and gradually she felt their bodies relax. Miles's breathing deepened. Noah's grip on her sleeve loosened, and for the first time in 6 months, the Harrington twins surrendered to sleep. Naomi stayed awake, praying over them in whispers, rebuking the fear that had held them captive. "No weapon formed against these children shall prosper. Fear, you have no authority here. In Jesus' name, these boys will rest." The house felt different, lighter, as if something dark had finally been expelled. 3 floors below, Caleb jolted awake at 2:47 a.m., his heart pounding from the usual nightmare. Then he realized what woke him wasn't a dream. It was silence, real silence, not the eerie quiet before the storm, but actual peace. He grabbed his phone and pulled up the security feed for the boys' room, expecting to see destruction or Naomi barricaded behind furniture. What he saw stopped his heart. The new nanny was lying in his son's bed, Miles and Noah sleeping peacefully on either side of her. One of her hands rested on Miles's back, the other was clasped in Noah's small fist, and her lips were moving, praying. Caleb stood frozen, watching the impossible scene. Then, before he could think better of it, he was walking through the quiet mansion toward his son's room. He opened the door as quietly as possible. The nightlight cast soft shadows across the scene, and Caleb felt something he hadn't felt since Elena died. The presence of God. It filled the room like light, like warmth, like everything he'd been running from for 6 months because it hurt too much to believe God still cared. Naomi opened her eyes and saw him standing there. She didn't look guilty or defensive. She looked at peace. "They fell asleep about 2 hours ago," she whispered. "They haven't stirred since." Caleb's voice came out rough with emotion. "How did you—" "I didn't do anything, Mr. Harrington. I just stayed." Caleb looked at his sons, really looked at them, for the first time in months. Their faces were relaxed, peaceful, no longer twisted with nightmares. They looked like the boys they used to be. "They were terrified," Naomi continued softly. "Miles thinks sleep means death. Noah thinks God punishes love. But fear is a liar, Mr. Harrington. And tonight, we started teaching them the truth." Caleb felt tears streaming down his face. "Who are you?" Naomi smiled gently. "I'm just a woman who knows what it's like to need someone to stay. And I'm someone who believes God still sends people exactly where they're needed most." Caleb sank into the chair by the window, unable to look away from the miracle happening in his son's bed. For 6 months, he'd thrown money, education, and expertise at his children's pain. And in one night, a woman with nothing but faith had done what no one else could do. She'd loved them through the darkness. As dawn began to break outside the windows, Caleb finally understood what he'd been too blind to see. Naomi Brooks wasn't hired. She was sent. The morning after the twins' first peaceful night, Caleb stood in his study facing 7 stone-faced board members who'd arrived unannounced. His brother-in-law, Richard, led the charge. "A woman with no credentials is sleeping in your son's bedroom." Richard's voice dripped with judgment. "Caleb, have you lost your mind?" "She got them to sleep," Caleb said quietly, "for the first time in 6 months." "And what happens when she doesn't?" Margaret, Elena's mother, dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. "What happens when those boys get attached and she leaves like everyone else? You're setting them up for more heartbreak." Caleb's corporate attorney, James Chen, cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrington, From a liability standpoint, having an employee share a bed with minors, even in a caretaking capacity, opens you up to serious legal exposure. I strongly advise. She's not an employee, Caleb interrupted. She's. He stopped, unsure how to finish. What was Naomi? A miracle? An answer to prayers he'd stopped praying? She's a stranger, Richard finished coldly. A stranger you've given unprecedented access to vulnerable children. I'm calling for a formal review of your custody fitness. The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. You wouldn't. Watch me. Those boys are Elena's legacy, and I won't stand by while you let some woman with a savior complex experiment on them. Downstairs, Naomi faced her own battle. Mrs. Pierce had gathered the household staff in the kitchen, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. 23 nannies before you, Mrs. Pierce said coldly. What makes you think you're special? I don't think I'm special, Naomi replied gently. I just think those boys needed someone who understood their pain. The head of security, Marcus, leaned against the counter. You know what I think? I think you got lucky one night, but this family has resources, connections. They don't need someone who prays problems away. I'm not praying problems away. I'm praying them through. The cook, an older woman named Helen, shook her head. Those boys have had therapists, specialists, people with real training. What do you have? A Bible and good intentions? Naomi met each pair of eyes steadily. I have what those boys need most. Someone who won't leave when it gets hard. We'll see, Mrs. Pierce said. We'll see how long you last. But that night, when 8 p.m. came, the hour the twins usually descended into chaos, Miles and Noah asked Naomi to read to them instead. They sat on either side of her on the couch, heads resting against her shoulders, as she read from a children's Bible. Mama used to read us this one, Noah said softly, pointing to the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Naomi's heart caught, but she kept her voice steady. Did she? What did she say about it? She said God sends angels when we're scared, Miles answered. But where were Mama's angels? The question hung in the air like smoke. Naomi closed the book and pulled both boys close. I don't know, baby. I don't know why God called your mama home when you needed her so much, but I know he didn't forget about you. And I know your mama would want you to remember she loved you more than anything. For the first time, the boys cried about their mother without rage, just pure, honest grief. And when they finally exhausted themselves, they fell asleep in Naomi's arms right there on the couch. Caleb found them an hour later and just stood watching, his throat tight with emotion. The healing lasted 3 days. 3 beautiful, impossible days where the mansion felt like a home again. The boys laughed. They ate full meals. They slept through the night. Then the test came. On the 4th night, Miles woke up screaming, Mama! Mama, don't leave! Naomi rushed to his side, but he lashed out, hitting her arm. You're not her. You'll never be her. Noah woke up and immediately began throwing things, books, toys, anything within reach. I hate you. I hate everyone. The old Naomi, the one who'd survived foster care by building walls, wanted to step back, protect herself. But she'd learned something in all those years of pain. Love doesn't retreat. She moved toward the boys, not away. Miles hit her again, and she caught his small fists in her hands. It's okay to be angry. Hit the pillow if you need to, but I'm not leaving. Yes, you will, Miles sobbed. Everyone does. No, baby, not me, not ever. Noah hurled a lamp that shattered against the wall and then collapsed in tears. Naomi gathered him up despite his struggling. Let it out, Noah, all of it. I'm still here. She held them both as they raged and wept, whispering prayers of peace, refusing to let go even when they said cruel things, even when they told her they hated her. I know you don't hate me, she said gently. You hate that your mama is gone, and that's okay. God can handle your anger. Gradually, slowly, the storm passed. The boys went limp in her arms, exhausted from fighting ghosts they couldn't defeat. "You're still here," Miles whispered in wonder. "I told you I would be." "But we were bad." "No, sweetheart, you were hurt. There's a difference." From the doorway, Caleb watched it all. When the boys finally fell back asleep, he followed Naomi into the hallway. "You should have called." "Me," he said, his voice rough. "Why? So you could do what? Punish them? They don't need discipline, Mr. Harrington. They need to know love doesn't have conditions." Caleb leaned against the wall, suddenly looking more tired than Naomi had ever seen him. "I don't know how to do this, how to be what they need." "Then learn. They're your sons. They look at me like I'm a stranger." Caleb's voice broke. "Like I failed them." "Did you?" The question was gentle but direct. Caleb closed his eyes. "Yes, I worked all the time. Let Elna handle everything at home. And when she died, I didn't know how to be a father without her." He laughed bitterly. "Hell, I don't even know how to pray anymore." "Why not?" "Because I'm angry." The words exploded out of him. "I'm angry at God for taking her, angry that he didn't answer my prayers, angry that my sons are suffering, and no amount of money can fix it." Naomi let the silence settle before speaking. "You stopped praying because you think God left first." Caleb's eyes flew open. "Didn't he?" "No, Mr. Harrington. He's been here the whole time, waiting for you to stop running. I don't know how to go back to him. Not after everything I've thought, everything I've said." "God doesn't need your perfect prayers, Caleb." It was the first time she'd used his first name. "He needs your honest ones. Even if honest means angry. Even if honest means broken." Caleb sank to the floor right there in the hallway, his billion-dollar empire forgotten as he finally let himself feel everything he'd been holding back for 6 months. "I miss her so much, and I'm so scared I'm going to fail our boys." Naomi sat beside him. "Then tell God that. He already knows. Knowing isn't the same as hearing. Pray, Caleb, even if it's just help." So there in the darkened hallway, a billionaire who'd built an empire on his own strength whispered the smallest, most powerful prayer he'd ever prayed. Help. And in that moment, Caleb felt something he hadn't felt since Elena died. Not peace exactly, but presence. The sense that he wasn't carrying this alone. "God heals families by sending people who stay," Naomi said softly. "But staying isn't just physical, Caleb. You have to stay present in your pain. Stay present with your sons. Stay present with God, even when it hurts." Caleb looked at this remarkable woman who'd walked into his chaos and refused to run. How do you do it? How do you stay when everything in you wants to leave? Naomi's smile was sad and knowing. "Because someone stayed for me once, and that changed everything." She stood and offered him her hand. "Come on, let's check on your boys." When they entered the bedroom, Miles and Noah were sleeping peacefully again, their small faces relaxed in the nightlight's glow. "They're healing," Caleb whispered. "We all are," Naomi replied. "One staid prayer at a time." And as Caleb watched his sons sleep, he realized that the war wasn't over. The grief would come in waves. The hard days would return. But for the first time in 6 months, he believed they might actually survive it, because staying, he was learning, was the most powerful weapon against fear, and they finally had someone teaching them how. 3 months later, the Harrington mansion woke to a sound it hadn't heard in nearly a year. Laughter. Miles and Noah raced down the grand staircase, their feet thundering on the marble, chasing each other in a game only they understood. Gone were the dark circles under their eyes. Gone were the hollow, haunted expressions that had made them look like ghosts of themselves. "Mama Naomi!" Miles called out, skidding into the kitchen. "Noah said I can't have pancakes for breakfast because—" He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes going wide as he realized what he'd said. The kitchen fell silent. Mrs. Pierce paused with a coffee pot in hand. Helen stopped whisking eggs. Even Marcus, grabbing his morning coffee, froze. Noah appeared in the doorway, equally stunned. "Miles, you called her—" "I know what I called her," Miles said quietly, his eyes finding Naomi's across the room. Naomi felt her heart expand and break at the same time. She knelt down, opening her arms. "Come here, both of you." The boys ran to her, and she held them close. "It's okay," she whispered. "Your mama will always be your mama. Always. But if you need a name for what I am to you, then Mama Naomi is just fine." Miles pulled back, his young face serious. "Is that okay? For us to call you that?" "Baby, it's more than okay. It's an honor." Noah threw his arms around her neck. "We love you, Mama Naomi." "I love you too. Both of you. So very much." From the kitchen doorway, Caleb watched the scene with tears in his eyes. Mrs. Pierce walked over and squeezed his shoulder. "That woman is a gift from God himself," she whispered. "I know," Caleb replied. "I know she is." The transformation hadn't been instant or easy. There had been setbacks, hard nights, moments when fear tried to reclaim its territory. But slowly, steadily, the Harrington house had been rebuilt from the inside out. And the biggest transformation wasn't in the twins. It was in Caleb himself. He'd started small, coming home for dinner instead of eating at his desk, reading bedtime stories instead of checking emails. But the real change came when Naomi had challenged him one evening after the boys were asleep. "When was the last time you prayed with your sons?" Caleb had looked up from his laptop, defensive. "I pray, just not out loud, where they can hear you, where they can learn that men talk to God too." The words had cut deep because they were true. Caleb had outsourced his children's spiritual development the same way he'd outsourced everything else, assuming someone else could do it better. That night, he'd walked into the boys' room as Naomi was tucking them in. "Mind if I join you?" The boys had looked surprised, but they'd made room for him on the bed. And for the first time since Elena's death, Caleb had prayed with his sons. "God, I don't really know what to say. I'm still learning how to do this. But thank you for Miles and Noah. Thank you for another day with them. And thank you for—" His voice caught. "Thank you for sending Naomi when we needed her most. Help me be the father they deserve. Amen." "Amen," the boys had echoed. It had become their nightly ritual. Some nights, Caleb's prayers were eloquent. Other nights, they were just, "God, help." But he showed up. Every single night, he'd also made changes at work. His assistant, Rebecca, had nearly fainted when he'd announced he was leaving the office at 4 p.m. daily. "Sir, you have meetings scheduled until 7. Reschedule them for morning. My sons get home from school at 4:30, and I'm going to be there." The board had grumbled. Richard had called him soft, but Caleb didn't care. He'd built an empire, but nearly lost his family. No business deal was worth that cost. Now, watching Miles and Noah eat breakfast while chattering excitedly about their school day, Caleb couldn't remember why he'd ever thought anything was more important than this. "Daddy, did you know that Mama Naomi is teaching us about Daniel in the lion's den?" Noah said, syrup on his chin. "Is she now?" "Yeah, and she said that God didn't take the lions away. He just made sure Daniel wasn't alone." Miles looked thoughtful. "That's kind of like us, right? God didn't take the sad away, but he made sure we weren't alone." Caleb met Naomi's eyes across the table, and she smiled softly. These boys were learning theology through their own story, and it was beautiful. Later that evening, after the boys were in bed, Caleb found Naomi in the library, staring out the window at the garden. "You're thinking about leaving," he said quietly. Naomi turned, surprised. How did you know? Your contract ends next week, and you've been looking at the boys differently, like you're memorizing them. She sighed and sat down on the window seat. I've been praying about it. The boys are doing so well now, Caleb. They sleep through the night. They're thriving in school. They've started talking about Elena without breaking down. She smiled sadly. My job here is done. Is it? You don't need me anymore. Don't we? Caleb sat across from her. Naomi, you didn't just help my sons. You helped me. You taught me how to be present, how to pray again, how to parent through pain instead of around it. And now you can do it without me. I don't want to do it without you. The words came out more intense than he'd intended. The boys need you. He stopped, unsure how to finish. Before Naomi could respond, small footsteps sounded in the hallway. Miles and Noah appeared in their pajamas, tears streaming down their faces. You're leaving? Miles's voice was raw with panic. We heard you talking, Noah sobbed. Caleb's heart broke. Boys, it's okay. No, it's not. Miles ran to Naomi. You promised you wouldn't leave. You said you'd stay. I said I wouldn't leave like the others, Naomi said gently, pulling him close. I said I wouldn't run away when things got hard. But you're not having hard times anymore, sweetheart. You're healing. But we need you. Noah threw himself at her. Please, Mama Naomi, please don't go. Naomi looked at Caleb helplessly, tears in her own eyes. Boys, what if we asked you to stay differently? Caleb's voice was steady now, certain. He knelt beside his sons. Naomi, when you came here, I hired you to take care of my children. But somewhere along the way, you became part of our family. Not the help, not the employee, family. Naomi's breath caught. The boys call you Mama Naomi because that's what you are to them. You've been there for every nightmare, every breakthrough, every moment that mattered. Caleb's voice grew thick. And I'm asking you to stay. Not because I'm paying you, but because this is where you belong. Caleb, I'm not asking you to be their nanny, Naomi. I'm asking you to be part of this family. To let us be your family. He smiled through tears. You taught us how to stay. Now let us return the favor. The boys clung to her, their small bodies shaking with hope and fear. And Naomi realized something profound. She'd spent her whole life being the one who stayed, but she'd never let anyone stay for her. I'm scared, she whispered. What if nothing? Caleb said firmly. We're not going anywhere, and neither are you. Not anymore. Naomi looked down at Miles and Noah, then at Caleb, and saw the family God had built from broken pieces, not through her strength, but through his. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll stay. The boys erupted in celebration, hugging her so tightly she could barely breathe. And as Caleb joined the embrace, Naomi felt something she hadn't felt since she was 7 years old. Home. Not a house, not a job, but a place where she was chosen, wanted, loved, where she finally belonged. 6 months later, a photographer would have found them in the same bedroom where this story began. The same bed, the same twins. But everything else had changed. Miles and Noah slept peacefully, their breathing deep and even. No nightmares chased them. No fear held them captive. They clutched their blankets instead of clinging to terror. Naomi sat in the rocking chair nearby, a Bible open in her lap, keeping watch as she always did. But now Caleb was there too, sitting beside her, their hands intertwined. You know what I realized? Caleb whispered. What? God didn't send you to fix my sons. He sent you to rebuild my family. There's a difference, Naomi smiled. And what's the difference? Fixing is temporary. Rebuilding is forever. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the boys sleep. And in that quiet moment, they both understood the miracle they'd witnessed. Fear is louder than rebellion, but love is louder than fear. God sends healers in ordinary clothing, not because they're extraordinary, but because they're obedient. Love that stays is spiritual warfare, and it always wins. Presence is more powerful than wealth, because money can buy everything except what matters most. And sometimes the greatest miracle isn't the dramatic rescue. It's simply the decision to stay when everything else says run. "Thank you," Caleb whispered. "For what?" "For teaching us what staying means." Naomi squeezed his hand. "Thank you for letting me." In the bed, Miles stirred slightly and smiled in his sleep. Beside him, Noah reached out and found his brother's hand, the way they'd learned to reach for each other instead of push away. The house was finally at peace. The family was finally whole. And in heaven, Elena smiled, knowing her boys were going to be okay, because God had sent them exactly who they needed. Someone who understood that the greatest act of faith isn't moving mountains. It's staying in the valley until the healing comes. God heals families by sending people who stay. And sometimes, the people who stay are healed too.